This is John. His catalytic converter was stolen. He went to his local police, but they couldn't do much because of the lack of evidence. John's case isn't unique. Others have also been experiencing crimes like his. Some crimes are higher than they were before the pandemic started, including assault, auto theft, and burglary. Because of these types of crimes with little evidence to go on, police agencies across the state have been using license plate reader technology to help solve them. The data can be used for parking enforcement or tracking illegal activity like theft or other vehicular crimes.
LPR stands for license plate reading or license plate recognition. This is technology that's been around for a long time, right? That the idea of recognizing the license plate by a camera is not new. My company did not invent this. A lot of what companies have done for years is they put cameras up on any kind of a road or on police vehicles, and it will just scan, as this is what I think Dave was talking about, like they'll just scan any license plates and put that into a database. And then historically what happened is they would try to match up those license plate numbers, like characters on the license plate, with wanted or stolen vehicles. Previous technology would read the license plate characters and numbers off of a reflective plate, right, a metal plate. And so they would then take a picture of the surrounding vehicle, put it into a database, and then somebody could type in and search that information and see, is this car wanted or stolen, or is there a warrant out for the person's arrest maybe?
It was originally built for neighborhoods, and it's what's called a license plate reading camera. So as cars drive by, we have a computer vision algorithm that says, oh, that's a red Honda. It's got a Nevada tag. And through our integration with the FBI, we also know if that car is stolen, if it has an outstanding warrant, if it has an amber alert, a silver alert, you name it. There's about a quarter of a million of those cars in any given second that we're looking for. And if that car is hot, our software runs in the patrol vehicles and actually notifies the nearest officer and says, go do it.
As this technology becomes more widespread, we need to ask, what do we as a society truly value? Some police officials claim that LPR cameras have helped solve more crimes.
We had 6 occupied stolen vehicles recovered during that time frame. So roughly 6 occupied stolen vehicles in an 8-month time frame. That's from officers, conducting traffic enforcement stops, tripping license plates, and finding out the vehicle is stolen. In the first month that we had the system up, this system alerted us to 5 stolen vehicles in our city, and we had our officers utilizing that camera technology and the alerts from that. We recovered 5 occupied stolen vehicles and arrested suspects.
So if my home were to get broken into or my catalytic converter stolen, I too would have video, and I would be able to provide that video to the officers, and our officers in town would then immediately go to Flock and look for those vehicles. And we've had great success with that. It's something that when I read my Watch Commander reports, we see it all the time. So that would be the difference in what you might see if that crime were to happen in Danville, is you would see an immediate reaction into the investigation. All of our officers use our Flock safety cameras on such a regular basis that they're an integral part of what they do. As their car is, as their radio is, it's something that gets used every day, all the time. Now here's the issue. It is not an end-all be-all fairy dust solution. It is a solution that is designed to be layered with other solutions.
That's great, right? But people have claimed that having these cameras is like being in a real-life 1984 situation. And while the data has a legit use in criminal investigations, it can also be abused. The ACLU and EFF have voiced their concerns, like constant surveillance.
But what we're talking about through technology is just sort of the ability to indiscriminately watch every single person at all times. And even though it's tempting to think about this technology in isolation, that's not how it works, right? If you're giving this information to police, it can then be brought into a domain awareness system, which will bring in networks of cameras, which will look at social media, which will compare it against other databases. It's just a big network of surveillance. So the idea that your movements in public were always subject to some sort of being watched, it's just completely different when you think about the way that modern surveillance works and the way that more of your movements are sort of being pulled together. You probably don't expect that a system will automatically try to see where you've been, how often you've been, where you're likely to be, etc. That is a sort of serious change in what people would expect.
And there are real-life situations that show the abuse of LPR cameras.
So one of the things that often comes up is ALPR will make mistakes. It'll misread a plate, or a watch list will not have been updated, or there won't be enough information on there. There was a case last fall where a car full of black children in Aurora, Colorado, was pulled over, and all the kids were pulled out of the car and handcuffed and put on the ground. And it turned out that the license plate reader read their plate and matched it to a watch list of the same number, but for a plate in a totally different state. And that was an extremely traumatic, dangerous, potentially deadly situation affecting children. Now, this same thing happened several years earlier in San Francisco. And again, it was a black member of our community who had the same thing happen. Sacramento was using license plate readers to routinely surveil people just because they received welfare benefits. And they were doing so in a violation of state law. And they shut down the program after we started asking questions. So, I mean, this is something that we also don't really know what all of the damage is, because when we started asking agencies in California for the audits that they're supposed to conduct per their own policies, most of them said, well, we don't even have the audits. We didn't actually conduct them. So if they're not checking for abuse of the system, and if they're not checking for errors in the system, we're never going to have data that shows where the problems are, because they're refusing to even document the problems.
Another concern involves how this system would be governed and other social issues.
It's not only about trying to catch crime and then take that footage and turn it over the police. There's this whole new social dimension to these systems as well that I find really troubling. You know, people post footage on Nextdoor, right? So you create this culture of public shaming that happens. Some of the other concerns I have about some of these systems, again, is around the governance. I mean, you know, you could create a virtual private camera network for a neighborhood, for example, and try to limit the access of that network, you know, to the residents that live there. But then the residents themselves have to manage that system. And you get all sorts of other concerns. And it kind of like takes that nosy neighbor syndrome and like ups the ability to spy on your neighbors, as well as I think the potential consequences. And so it's not just about the policing issues. There's a whole mess of social issues there, where what I find is that people often don't use these things kind of for the best interests of themselves or their community. And there's not a lot of guidance on really, I think, the self-governance of how do we actually responsibly manage these systems so that we don't create this network where, you know, we kind of expect that every single move we make in a public space is going to be filmed perpetually and, you know, searchable, permanent.
California State Senator Scott Wiener is planning to do something about this. He recently introduced SB 210, the License Plate Privacy Act, which will hopefully prevent ALPR data from misuse by law enforcement. SB 210 requires that ALPR data be deleted within 24 hours, an annual audit of this data, the DOJ publish a policy template as a guideline, and have the DOJ issue guidance to law enforcement about their current data. So, what do you think? Is the solution an invasion of privacy or a necessity for public safety? Comment below and let your local officials know.